Hey, welcome to this week's episode of The Green Room. We're so glad you're joining us. Today, we have a couple guests with us. Pastor Gary's on The Green Room set, so how awesome is that? So I hope you guys have enjoyed The Green Room. You can catch that on YouTube. You can also access that on the app, because the app is where it's at, Pastor Brian. And so, tune in, like the YouTube channel, subscribe, and also share it, because we've also had several folks tell us that the Green Room has been beneficial to their commute, their small group, and friends that they've shared it with on social media. So let me kick it over to Pastor Gary. He gave us a great message today on giving.
Yeah, man, I had so much fun this morning sharing. One of the points that really stuck out to me was, we get to this moment when we say, man, I messed up with my money, and now I have this debt. And what am I going to do with this debt? And what I challenged you guys to think was, we never think, hey, things are going really good. The funds are coming in and I'm doing pretty much what I'm going to do. What am I going to do with all this extra? We don't do that. The world just kind of keeps telling us, but now you can get more, but now you can more, now you can get more. And that got me to thinking about it. It's like, man, how intentional am I when things are comfortable to really look at my budget? And how would I even go about that? Because I don't feel like I'm hanging over the flames, right, to do this right. And so that's why I'm really glad that Jim's here, because Jim oversees our money management ministry, and that was what part of this ministry we haven't talked about as much, at least not on Sunday morning, where we offer financial coaching, where we have people who know their stuff, who are willing to sit down with you one-on-one or one per family and look at, here's your expenses, here's your income, here's your, the bills, and how we suggest you do this. You might be able to get insurance for cheaper. You might be able to, cancel cable, blah, blah, blah. But we never really have looked at that from the, wow, I'm doing really, really good, but am I being as intentional as I can be with that? Right. And so I just wanted to throw it over to you, Jim. Jim, what would that conversation look like? You have the normal conversation, right? When they come in saying, okay, how do I get out of trouble? So maybe talk about that. But what if somebody wanted to come talk to you to say, look, things are going good, but I feel like I'm not being as intentional as I could be? How would you handle that conversation?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Just before, though, you triggered a thought when you talked about, oh, hey, if I'm, getting by. And, they say the greatest enemy of great is good, right? So it's like, and we sense that there are folks that feel like, oh, I'm meeting, my ends here. I kind of have my budget under control, but it's like, well, where could you take that? And just because you're treading water and making ends meet doesn't mean that you're fully honoring God, right, with either your income or your expenses. So what we would do with that, Gary, and you kind of hit that to start with, is that when people come in for financial coaching, first thing that we ask them to do is to track their expenses. And typically they don't. And it's interesting, anyone, myself included, if you asked us well, how do you spend your money? And you could kind of write down on paper. It's amazing how far off you can be in some categories if you're not actually tracking it. So food's a good example. Tell people, oh yeah, I spend about $350, or eating out, oh, that's probably $100. And then they go to track it and go, it's actually $275. Who would know, right? So you can't fix what you don't measure. And so the first step is, well, just track your expenses and then kind of put it into that form. And then we use a lot of Dave Ramsey's principles, and one of those is percentage of spend. So you say oh, this is what you would expect. So, rent or mortgage, maybe that's in that 10 to 17% range. And then we kind of look at it and go oh, actually, yours is 43. Well, maybe you ought to think about there's an opportunity to downsize. And we've had and helped people get out of their situation if they have a high mortgage or they're paying high rent and move to something that's less expensive. So you mean
people are supposed to take their finances so seriously that they literally move?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, that's what. Yeah. So a lot of the things here, Dave Ram talk about, sell the car. People buy a new car, they can't afford that. So that's another thing. And those are pretty dramatic things, but there's also things that are simpler than that, oh, well, let's look at your phone plan that you have. Can you scale that back? Cable's another big money draw. So you can look at some smaller categories too, but also some large categories. So we would have them track that. Before we start giving them advice, well, let's see what you have. We kind of look at those percentages and those buckets, and then try to give some guidance about, well, let's have some conversations about where you could cut back. can tell you it's amazing. You know, there's some things that people take as absolute, like, oh, well, my utilities are absolute. Well, is that right? What if you lowered your temperature a couple degrees and you wore a sweater
that's
around the
so
house the
cool.
first couple months? People have done that
Yeah.
and saved significant money. So, you know, it's even the things you go like, oh, that can't be changed.
Right.
You know, that's locked in. Well, that's not necessarily the case.
Yep. And I know that just because you do the teen finance literacy workshops, right, which we got to offer in Ocean Pines, and it was fantastic. I know that you know of some tools that are helpful for this, like apps, a particular app. You want to share about which one that is? I can't remember the name.
Every dollar.
So there's an app
Every
called
dollar app, and it's free. Now you can pay for like a
Premium.
right? Yeah, there always is, right? But just the basic will help you, and what that does is it lets you just budget. Okay, this is I have $2,000 coming in this month. Put it in buckets, and then track your expenses against those buckets. So it's a very handy tool. Someone says, "Oh, I don't want to keep the receipts. I don't want to have to worry about the reconciliation." Well, it's a real quick way that it can track, and it's easy. It's on your phone, so
I like easy.
easy
That's
is
pretty
good.
cool.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been able to help a lot of people.
That's cool.
You know what you got me thinking earlier, and I got the bill in the other day for my cable, and right behind that is the cell phone.
Right. Yeah, right.
It seems like back to back,
Yep.
and I'm like, 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, I used to have 3 channels. Cell phones were not a big thing.
That's right.
It was almost like if you broke down is when you use your cell phone. I just kept my cell phone in my car. But I'm like, the dynamics have changed to where we now consider these necessities.
Right.
To where you could kind of trim some of this stuff.
Absolutely.
And really save a lot of money because, I know personally, my bills are kind of big in those 2 areas. It's some of the biggest, utilities or what I would consider. But it's extra.
It is.
So it's just.
And there's some alternate sources of entertainment, right? They're coming in like Roku that you can look at.
Yeah.
That they're expanding the number of channels that they have.
Yeah, but this is what I noticed about
Okay,
that
go
though.
ahead.
Is what I've always wanted my whole life was a la carte TV.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right? So I don't have to pay this huge amount of money to get all these channels I'm not going to watch. And now, essentially, through the internet, through Roku and Netflix and Amazon, we have a la carte TV. I can get just the Disney stuff if I want it. Well, but you know what I'm doing? And I mentioned this in the. You know what I'm doing? I'm going. It's $7 more a month. That's not a cable bill. I'll get both of those, or I'll get 3 of those, or I'll get 5 of those because I got to have my sports and now something that should have been this incredibly costly, like 6 months down the road, you're like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
Right.
Because we think it's just $6.
Yeah.
And so these are little things that sneak in.
Right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. How did we get here? Because that's a concern that we often hear, echo or paraphrase from folks that come in for help. It's like, well, our car broke down, so we put that on the credit card, and then, 2 months later, we had an unexpected thing happen at school. We had a school trip, and we had to pay for that.
Yeah.
These little things, and all of a sudden, it's like, well, wait a second. Now we're in a spot where we're strapped, and we have all this debt, and it's growing. And they kind of ask that question, like, how did we get here? But it all comes back from, hey, if you don't have a plan, life will happen to you, whether or not you have a hand in controlling that or not, it will. And so it is important to go through that. So that's what we do. We would recommend and kind of look at it. And sometimes it does take a dramatic change for someone. And just to be candid and transparent with you, we have that, and people go like, no, I'm not willing to do that.
Yeah.
So you can help people up to a certain point, but people have to, one, step forward for help. That's the biggest step you can take, is to acknowledge, hey, I need help. But then when things are laid out in front of you, then to try to take advantage. And we don't dictate, certainly, just suggest things to people. But I have seen people go like, oh, no, I'm unwilling to do that, I'm unwilling to do that, I'm unwilling to do this, and go like, well, guess what?
This is what you're going to limit.
Those are all the cards in your hand.
Yeah, right.
The thing I'd encourage is if you're in group and listening to this and you're like, it's only me. I don't want to be that transparent and open up and share that because, I'm struggling with this more than probably others or whatever. One of the things we hear in Financial Peace is they get around these round tables and they did take that brave first step to kind of start addressing some of this, and they realize everyone at the table is very similar to their circumstance. Exactly right. So you can find community in this. So if you just take that brave step to kind of let someone take a look at your finances, you will probably realize it's not just you, it's a lot of others, and you can find community in that and
That's
support.
absolutely right.
Yep.
So
So if you're sitting out there and you're like, man, I hear what you're saying, and I think I can do this on my own. Maybe you can. Maybe you can. And so what would we recommend you do? Well, start tracking what you spend, all these things we just suggested, and then talk about it with other people anyway, even if you can do it on your own. Because you never know what your braveness and your competency in this area would encourage somebody else who realize maybe you can help them. Right? Everything that we do in the Christian life is about showing the love of God by serving others. And so if you're gifted and you're in a position where you can say, actually, I can do this myself, I don't need your help, maybe that's a sign that God has you lined up to be able to help somebody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I loved you sharing your parents.
Oh, that was so much fun.
That's so cool.
They still
today.
don't know I did that.
Yeah. So maybe they'll watch the video. We're sharing it again. Yeah. But it was neat. You used the example of your dad in the convenience store.
Yeah.
And I got thinking, I was actually just talking to a pair of parents that were on a travel and sports team, and they were saying, not only do I have to buy all these fees for uniforms and that sort of thing, but then it's hotels, and it's also all the eating out when we're away. And they said they were talking to another parent, and they were like, we couldn't keep up with that. We started packing. We started getting more. And so they realized just by opening up and sharing with someone else, they were able to trim a little bit. Not saying that all that's bad or whatever with the travel sports team, because they were trying to get, but it can add up. And if you start hitting financial crisis, those are some of the decisions you may need to start making for the health of your family.
Man, there's not much cheaper than peanut butter and jelly. You know what I'm saying?
It's funny you mentioned that. I kind of had a visual while you guys were talking about that, about like a boat, and it's a boat and it's got like 12 seats in it and sets of oars, and someone's going like, I can get there on my own. It's like, sure, you can. It's a lot harder. And it's going to take you a lot longer than if you had invited some people on the boat.
But that's true. That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Very, very, very cool. I did have one question come in today, and let's talk about this. I think I know what they're asking, but we'll unpack it. They said, can we close our credit card accounts before they are paid off?
So
does that make
you
sense?
You officially can't close that account out, but you can cut up your cards.
Yeah.
And so that's what we suggest. We're at FPU. We'll cut up cards and put them in there so that you cannot use them, but you can't close out that per se. There are services like, I want to consolidate my debt. I'm going to take these 5 credit cards out. Dave Ramsey does not suggest and recommend that, only because he goes, if you don't change the behavior, you'll just build the debt back up. And that, like that. So yeah, you can cut them up, stop using them, take that temptation away from you for that, but you really can't officially close that out until you pay off the balance.
And a lot of times, once you've cut a card up, what you don't realize is you've set that card up as an auto pay for something else. And just because you cut that card up doesn't mean that company that you've given access to your card isn't still going to hit that card every month. So if you're going to go cut your card up, make sure you look at it and you go, where did I set this thing up? And then go online and move that to something different, or else you're going to be like, but I cut it up. What happened?
Yeah.
How do you recommend, you bring up a really good point, because a lot of these services want the automatic renewal.
They do. So I'm glad you said this, because Don and I were talking about this yesterday. My father-in-law just moved into a retirement home, and they have an automatic, sign this form, and we'll take the money out of your account.
It's so convenient.
It is. And Don's going, I don't really feel comfortable, with that. And gosh, what if we move him? And I have heard horror stories of they'll continue to charge for a couple months. You're trying to get your money back. And what I said is, we can go to our bank online and set up an automatic payment from our side. It's us doing that, which is different than I'm giving another company permission to go in and take money out of my account. And if the amount's fixed, like this would be, you can do that. No, utilities or phone, not so much, right? Because it's not, that amount might vary for utilities, for example. But that's a way you could maintain control of it, but still get some convenience of the, without forgetting. Because some people forget to pay a bill, and then you got the interest, you got the, the charge for that. They could cut off your service, and you don't want to end up there.
That's cool. Anything else?
I think we've got some good stuff out there, man.
Okay, well, some of the feedback coming back from the green room is, best ways to use the green room in the group setting. So hopefully we have sparked some conversation points. Hopefully you guys will be really transparent. I know in our group personally, last week we just had a group member who's taken a family member through FPU. Which is really, really cool. So just think about opportunities where we can help others get fiscally responsible and help each other along the way, because we all want to be rowing that boat together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much for joining us.